We've got 4 great panel members for our discussion this afternoon around rural economy, perhaps the more broadest sense of what we're doing with agritourism. Jenn Stewart from Johnston, Carmichael, Fiona Smith from Westerton Farm, Claire McLaren from the Scottish Liberal Democrats, and Martin Kennedy, President of NFU Scotland. So we're delighted to have you guys with us today. I suppose the context for this session is really, Caroline touched on it this morning, it's about how do we articulate, I suppose, the opportunities and some of the barriers that we have for agritourism to be a really key driver for the rural economy across Scotland. By the nature of our businesses, we're very much based within that rural sector, and many of us in a more remote rural sector as well. On the back of all the changes to Pillar 2, post-Europe, a lot of the policy focus from a very farming perspective has really been looking more closely at that level of subsidy going forward. I guess very much around that new policy framework for farming, but there is a bigger picture, and as we move forward, especially in our discussions with politicians and government, there is an absolute shift in that now the monies and the support available for farming, which were always perhaps a bit more separate and in its own sort of sphere, will now be very much in the mix about rural development and the rural sector as a whole. So it seems like a timely opportunity to take the chance to have that slightly broader discussion today. So we've got a short video to run first. We'll then invite our speakers up onto the stage. Really short input, 3 to 5 minutes for them. This session is very much about everyone in the room. It is really dark up here and I cannot see any of you. So you're going to have to make yourselves known after. This is about hearing what you guys have got to say. Think about if you've got any particular questions for the panel members, or if you just have a contribution or an observation that you would really like to make. This session will be recorded, it will be scribed after. I represent the membership for Scottish Agritourism on the National Strategic Implementation Board, and it's great to be able to feed that up where we've got those people like the Cabinet Secretary and all, I suppose, the strategic leads for all of our governmental bodies around the table. So it would be really good to hear from you all today. Without further ado, I'm going to invite Jenn Stewart up. She's our first panel member. Jenn works for Johnston Carmichael from a farming background herself. Johnston Carmichael are the sponsors for this part and have been long-term supporters of Scottish agritourism in terms of being a silver trade partner for us. So perhaps, Jenn, I know that you'll be really familiar to lots of people because you do pop up on lots of our webinars and things, but if you want to just share, maybe just really quickly, a couple of key things that Johnston Carmichael do in terms of support for the rural economy, that would be great, and then share some of your thoughts with us. Okie dokes.
Do you want the video
first? Do we want the video? Yeah, okay, go on, run the video then. Sorry, thank you.
Hi there, I'm Brian Grogans. I'm head of the Rural Policy Unit in the Scottish Government. Thanks for giving us the time to update today briefly on the Rural Delivery Plan, and apologies that I can't be there in person. In 2023, the Scottish Government committed to publishing a plan setting out how all parts of the Scottish Government are delivering for Scotland's rural communities. And the plan is to publish the Rural Delivery Plan by the end of this parliamentary term. The Rural Delivery Plan will cover a range of key areas such as agriculture, marine, land reform, transport, housing, social justice, repopulation, digital connectivity, economic development and health and social care. It will address new or emerging challenges for Scotland's rural areas, such as those posed by the changes in climate, the just transition to net zero, Brexit and others. And the plan will cover mainland Scotland only, while the needs of island communities will be served by the National Islands Plan. One of the most crucial things to highlight here is that the Rural Delivery Plan is not necessarily going to be a vehicle to deliver new policy or new commitments or new funding. Rural needs are mainstreamed in the Scottish Government, meaning that specific policy teams must consider rural characteristics, needs and delivery within their policy development. Our team operates in the Scottish Government more as a centre for knowledge on rural matters, providing support to colleagues across government. And consequently, there are three elements to the rural delivery plan that we intend will deliver impact, and these are briefly summarised on this slide here. And thinking about those three deliverables in more detail, the plan will include a vision for a vibrant, sustainable, equal and inclusive rural Scotland with its diverse rural communities thriving across economic, cultural, social and environmental dimensions. And strategic objectives will be set out in the plan to outline our high-level aims and key policy areas that impact rural Scotland. And those policy areas are agriculture and marine, economy and digital, population and skills, social justice, housing, health and social care, environment and climate change, transport and culture. The plan will also contain ambition statements that articulate in more detail the goals set out in the strategic objectives, and it will also contain information on investments setting out what the Scottish Government is doing or is committed to doing to deliver the objectives set out in the vision. The Rural Lens Toolkit mentioned here on the slide is a vehicle for working with all policy teams in the Scottish Government to ensure that they are aware of the needs and opportunities in rural Scotland. And we're developing a suite of indicators in order to track what is being achieved in that rural space. In terms of development of the plan, we're keen to listen to what stakeholders have already told us. And we continue to engage in order to both share information and shape the vision, objectives and indicators. We'll be reviewing previously published Scottish Government consultations, and we'll also put in place some direct engagement by interacting with existing stakeholder events, meetings or newsletters over the coming months. And the idea is to have an engagement process which is not overburdensome but is proportionate and lets people have some effective input to the development of the plan. Moving from the general plan for the rural delivery plan to the more focused interests of this event, our core chapters will present a kind of look at some information we currently hold on agritourism, and a very high level picture of SG investments are listed here. So this is some of the SG investments relevant to your sector that might well find their way into the delivery plan. There are obviously more than are listed on this slide, and it's hardly an exhaustive list. But as we develop the plan, we'll have to make decisions about how we balance a full picture of investment without making the plan just too unwieldy and difficult to absorb. Moving on to publication and plans for post-publication, the commitment made was to deliver the RDP within the lifetime of this Parliament. Exactly when it publishes depends on a range of factors, including whether it would be beneficial to sync up publication with the National Islands Plan. In terms of future reporting, it's most likely that the data will be refreshed annually with some limited accompanying narrative, and then a fuller report and refreshed RDP will be produced on a longer timescale, and the specifics of all that are still to be decided by our ministerial working group. So thanks very much for your time. I'd like to get your thoughts on the questions on the slide. So if you have any input you'd like to give, or you'd like to get in touch for any reason really to speak to the team, please do get in touch at the mailbox address at the top of this slide here. The two specific questions we're interested in hearing more about are there any key events or fora or meetings and such like that you think we should regularly engage with? And secondly, is there a particular approach to ongoing reporting that you would find valuable going forwards and would help you in your work? So I'll stop there, but thanks so much for your time today, and I hope the rest of the event goes well. Thank you.
Good. All right, Jen, do you want to jump in now?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Johnston Carmichael are very proud to sponsor the conference again. We're very big supporters of the agritourism sector and have been since the outset. I did laugh at Caroline's analogy earlier on about it being like a baby. So just a little bit about Johnston Carmichael. We basically are sector specialists. We are very passionate about dealing and representing our clients in the rural food and drink, energy infrastructure and renewables, hospitality and tourism sectors, all sectors that relate into agriculture. We act for over 2,500 rural and food and drink businesses, and we have a team of over 1,000 people across Scotland and into England now, in Newcastle and London. So again, hugely passionate about helping everybody in the sector. It's quite a challenging time at the moment, so our teams are very busy having meetings with clients, you know, planning, being actually a key advisor and part of our clients' team. So don't just think of your accountant as being somebody you do your year-end books with. Your accountant should be, you know, part of your team and be an advisor there to help you, so make use of them. I've been asked along on the panel today to give some thoughts on the rural economy. And I guess what I would look at and say here is innovative, entrepreneurial, hardworking and resilient is how I see everybody in the room here. I would say resilience is probably being tested at the moment. Everybody is doing a fantastic job, but yet there are limits. Rural areas make up to 98% of Scotland's total landmass and almost 1/3 of the UK as a whole. Our farmers produce over 1/4 of the UK's food for exports. Our countryside custodians are leading the world in restoring peatland, creating woodland and helping nature fight back against biodiversity loss. Our rural estates alone produce 57% of Scotland's renewable energy. Rural businesses are the foundations and often the stones of the local economy in providing homes, jobs and services to their local communities. And just look at what agritourism does. Our tourism sector plays a crucial role in sustaining local economies, contributing 60 million annually and providing 229,000 jobs. Planning ahead is a hugely important aspect for multi-generational farming businesses, and the level of uncertainty we have at the moment makes this quite a challenge. Now, currently, as I see it, there are many barriers to allow the agritourism sector to grow and reach the 2030 targets. But, you know, I do think that we'll achieve it. But it would help if some of these barriers were eased or removed. Some of the barriers are the UK tax regime. The recent budget, I mean, businesses and farming families have been hit very hard. Look at the consequences of the increase in national insurance contributions. I mean, my business alone has 1,000 employees, so we certainly feel the hit there too. The increase in national minimum wage, the inheritance tax changes and changes in impact on agricultural property relief and business property relief and pensions. The abolition of furnished holiday lets, the tourism tax visitor levy, short-term letting legislation, business rates, land reform, lack of policy, changes to agricultural support. Basically, Scottish Government are not willing to commit to providing any certainty for us at the moment in terms of allowing us to plan ahead in terms of funding, and I think that's a huge ask that we actually need to work on. But there are positives, and there are always opportunities. Look at the talent and community impact we have. Our sector is full of incredibly talented, innovative and entrepreneurial people. Agritourism businesses create lots of employment opportunities in our local communities. I think we've got a role to do in education. I think we have an opportunity to educate. There was some fantastic storytelling happened this morning, and I think we need to see more of that. We need to bridge the gap of the urban-rural divide. You guys in this room can all champion that, telling the good, successful stories of what you're doing. I think that there perhaps will be a mindset change now. I think with the new tax rules, it may encourage succession planning to basically be moved along a little easier in terms of looking at the lifetime gifting. It's not without its challenges, but if we can look at that mindset change, that may also help. And I think collaboration and communication. We work better together as an industry. Other countries are doing this. As a professional services sector, we are part of a rural accounting group with 10 other UK professional accounting firms. We are currently pulling together data of the impact that the recent budget has had, and we are trying to inform government, Treasury on the impact they've created. And again, it's that collaboration. We need to get the supermarkets and the public on board. Great to read about what Morrison's are doing with the 1.4 billion funding support they've got for farmers. And again, we need to work closer with our Scottish Government. We need to ensure that they provide the certainty and support to allow for sustainable and profitable businesses going forward. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Jen. Really invaluable, I think, to see and get some of your thoughts there, given that you have a real kind of overview of the sector from the job that you guys do and the business that you have. Fiona, I don't know if many of you guys know Fiona. If you've been to a Monitor Farm meeting in Scotland somewhere in the last year, you may well have come across Fiona from Westerton Farm, one of our Monitor Farms. Really delighted that you're going to share some of your insights and thoughts with us today. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm just going to quickly go through a little bit about who I am and what we do and how we became one of the Monitor Farms, for those that don't know. I am fourth generation to farm within our family. We moved down to the Lawrencekirk area in the 1920s, and I have worked on the family farm from an undisclosed age, a very young age, all my life. I've always been involved with what's been going on. I've always really enjoyed it, and it's definitely been a massive part of my upbringing. I left home at 18 and went to university to study business and economics in Glasgow, and after that had a very short but enjoyable career in corporate banking for about 8 years. After a change in the banking structure, I took voluntary redundancy and moved to become a business advisor at Business Gateway in Aberdeen. As part of that, I began to really think about our own home business that we had and how I could possibly move home and become part of that rather than working up in the city. My dad decided that was a really ideal time to take me down to the Oxford Farming Conference, and who should I bump into but Caroline Miller. Caroline was speaking that day about her journey into the agritourism business, into the sector, and it really got me thinking about the opportunities that we had within Aberdeenshire, but specifically on our farm. After that, I handed my notice in at Business Gateway and came back to the farm. I joined the Rural Leadership Programme in 2014, which has been an absolutely invaluable part of what we've done at Westerton and given me the confidence to change the way we were doing things. Shortly after that followed a business trip to Tuscany with Caroline, where we went round lots of agritourism businesses and saw what they were doing. I remember at the time feeling quite overwhelmed and thinking, how on earth are we going to bring this back to Scotland? They've got sunshine, they've got great wine, they've got olive oil and mozzarella up to their eyes, and I just couldn't quite translate it back to what we were doing in Aberdeenshire. However, after I got back home and had a wee think about it, I decided that I had a path and I was going to go down it. We opened our first little business venture into business retail in 2017 with an honesty hut at the end of the farm track called the Spud Hut. It slowly built up in business, and in 2020 went absolutely crazy during COVID and we couldn't keep up. By that time, we'd also looked into other bits and pieces we could do on the farm. We'd started growing pumpkins, which we still do today, and we'd also started doing farm tours, which were really popular. We opened our farm shop, our proper grown-up farm shop, as opposed to our honesty farm shop, in 2021, farm to table, and we now employ 10 people to work there. We do pick your own, we do farm tours, we do a lot of group events. We are also in collaboration with our local distillery in Fettercairn as part of their 200 Club, where we supply grain direct to the distillery. We became a Monitor Farm in 2023 as part of our journey with agritourism because we knew we wanted to grow and we wanted to expand. We had plans and we needed a bit of help. Our ideas for the future revolve a lot around connecting people back with their food. We feel there's a very big disconnect between the public's perception of what good food is and what good food actually is, and we need them to reappreciate the value of food. We are hoping to open up some form of cook school within the farm and show people how, once again, to cook in the kind of wholesome era that our grandparents would have done. We want to really focus on wellness, getting people back outside, getting their fingernails dirty and appreciating where we are. But we also want to get people to come and visit us. We want to embrace tourism and bring people from other countries and other parts of the UK into Aberdeenshire and show them what we have to offer. We recently ventured into doing pop-up meals with On the Farm. We hosted a farm feast where 90% of the ingredients came from within 15 miles of the farm. It was a huge success and people really enjoyed the locality of the foods. We farm as well, obviously, 420 acres of arable land. We're mainly cereal farmers. My dad will be laughing at me when I say we have livestock because we have 9 chickens, 4 alpacas and 3 goats, with plans to expand. The animals are there for fun. They're there to help attract people to the farm. The children love them, and we do hope to get more animal experiences for children who don't have that opportunity in day-to-day life. But they are also all going to be part of our regenerative farming story, and us telling the story that every animal is there for a reason and how we can work with the land and make sure that we are looking after it for the next generation. By adding value to our business through agritourism, we really hope to make our business sustainable both generationally and in terms of how we actually farm by looking after our soils. I think one of the biggest challenges that we're facing as a business is people's perception of agriculture and getting them reconnected with their food. It's a massive mission of ours to make sure that people know exactly what they're eating, how it was grown, and can really appreciate the value of good, honest food. Thank you.
Thanks, Fiona. A great introduction to those of you that aren't familiar with the Westerton farms. It takes a bit of balls to be a monitor farm, I have to think, opening yourself up to scrutiny by your peer group. So really appreciate you being here today. Our third perspective this afternoon is Claire McLaren. She is the spokesperson for the Scottish Liberal Democrat Party on agriculture, remote and rural communities. She would describe herself as a daughter of a farmer and the mother of a farmer, and her sister-in-law is involved with agritourism, I think, as well. So your sister is brilliant. Great. Appreciate you being here. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, hello. I'm also a councillor in Perth and Kinross. Whether I should reveal that to you or not, I don't know. I feel like I might be about to repeat so much that has been said earlier this morning. I feel, and these are really just my personal thoughts, I've just thought through my head and penned, hearing the stories from family and out with in the industry, an industry that I feel so connected to, although live in the town. I'm now a townie. So the rural economy can suffer from being overlooked, forgotten about, or just taken for granted. An active and growing rural economy is vital and deserves a greater acknowledgement, particularly from governments. Rural economic activity has a social gain, not just fiscal receipts. Entrepreneurialism is a word I would use to describe many in this sector of the economy, and particularly agritourism, which has been Jenn opened with. There are so many business types. There's agriculture, there's food-producing agriculture, there's food manufacturing, summer house drinks, as an example. Services within the rural sector, garden landscaping, care service providers, hospitality, dog grooming, hairdressers, tourist-related and agricultural land management-related services. And they're all generally small to medium-sized businesses, which are such an important part of the wider economic activity. Scotland benefits from stunning, impactful scenery, historic buildings, traditional cultures, and a characteristic population, which forms part of the worldwide reputation Scotland has as a tourist destination and stimulates the active tourism sector. Agritourism is such an important part of that tourism sector, and as we heard earlier this morning, a major growth sector. In listing challenges or highlighting some, I can't not mention the recent Westminster budget, which has contained announcements, which is akin, I would say, to an earthquake rattling through the agricultural sector. Earthquakes happen with little warning. We may look back and maybe identify a tremor or two. I'm not so sure we even will, but however, in the main, it's shocking, and we are all in shock. This has attacked the foundations of rural communities, their survival and their ability to continue economic activity. Impacts of this budget have yet to be seen on the ground. And here in Scotland, we've got further Scottish budget to wait to come. For those in the sector, navigating the dramatic shifting of the goalposts overnight without consultation will be an immense challenge. Many businesses in the agritourism sector are linked to farming family units established through a need to generate an additional revenue stream. One of the biggest challenges active businesses in the rural community face is, I'm now going to list challenges, sorry that didn't flow very well. One of the challenges I hear about constantly is attracting a dedicated labour supply. And I'm heartened to hear this morning of many businesses saying how many people that they are employing in part-time, full-time, and in quite rural areas. The availability of affordable rural housing is again within that conversation, and it's often cited as part of the labour supply issue. There is an ongoing frustration, and I'm sure many are about to nod, as to the length of time planning applications are taking to be determined by council planning departments. Some councils do perform better than others, it has to be said. And delays in planning decisions impact on delivery of business expansion or new businesses opening, which inevitably results in a rise in costs. Getting concepts projects out of the ground tend to have multiple challenges, planning being one. The focus on wider environmental custodianship is more and more evident. Wildlife tourism is a growing agritourism, part of your agritourism offering, and that will meet the need of this expanding demand. And despite all the challenges and headwinds that are present today, there is always opportunities. A basic business proposal is supply and demand. So you do have the demand, and the supply is there through yourselves, through your determination, through your entrepreneurialism. And when the dust settles from this catastrophic event that we're all riding the crest of the wave of, these opportunities will still be there. So thank you. Sorry, was that 5 minutes? No. Didn't mean to be.
It's all right. I've been threatened with sort of whipping from Caroline if I don't keep us to time. So, you know when you've been millered, even vicariously. So thank you, Claire. Martin, stage is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alison. Ladies and gentlemen, what a great privilege it is to be here today at this Agritourism event, which is fantastic. And I have to say, well done in getting it to where it is at the present time. And I think that's taken an awful lot of drive, encouragement, enthusiasm from the likes of Caroline that we heard from earlier on. And I'd just like to say briefly, as NFU President, Caroline was actually on our board of directors for a few years, and I hope she's going to come back, because it's been no surprise, absolutely no surprise to me, that you're going to have the international agritourism event here. Because when Caroline asks you to do something, you feel that, yes, you're going to have to do this. You need to do this, or she won't be happy. And I think that drive and enthusiasm is tremendous. So I think there's a lot of thanks needs to go to Caroline for that. So this topic's about the challenges and opportunities. I think we've got fantastic opportunities. Absolutely, I'm upbeat. My glass is always half full. And believe me, as a farmer and as a president of NFU Scotland, speaking to some farmers around the country, being optimistic is really challenging sometimes, because the negativity that's there doesn't help our industry, and we need to rise above that. So opportunities has to be at our forefront. So some of the challenges are, Rachel mentioned earlier before lunch that, the age of farmers just now, I'm only a week away from the average age of farmer, which is 59. That's really, really scary. And we're really not good at letting the next generation take things forward and actually drive things forward. And we've got to take a real, learning from that. I know when I started on as Vice President at NFU Scotland in 2017, my middle daughter, Katrina, was always phoning me, wondering what to do with this, that, and the next thing. And she got fed up and started making decisions herself. And, of course, I'd be going home thinking, why have you done this? Why have you done that? Then after a couple of, maybe 6 months, 8 months, then I was going home thinking, oh, well, why did I not think of that? This is the next generation we're talking about here, and that's the challenge we have. And we're very fortunate at home. We're a hill farm, a tenant farm. We're at 800 feet above sea level. We've got 2,500 feet. And Jane and I have 3 girls. My oldest daughter, Gillian, who's 29, is a forestry manager with Scottish Woodlands. Katrina and Yvonne both went to agricultural college. And of course, Yvonne is right into the gamekeeping just now. So I'm very privileged that I've got 3 daughters, one in forestry, one in farming, one in gamekeeping. What more could you ask for? But it's about that rural community and what it all delivers. It's fantastic, and I'm extremely proud of that. But again, coming back to the challenges, Jen highlighted earlier on what the issues are with the budget right now. I'm just heading off, as soon as I get off the stage here, down to London to meet with an awful lot of other people to join them and try and get our message across that the implications this is going to have right across the whole of the UK is sending shockwaves through farmers, and it's really, really worrying. And again, on the 28th, the budget, as again Jen mentioned, now we're actually competing. We're actually competing as a budget. We no longer have that ring-fenced budget of security that we've had for over 50 years, first of all from Europe, and then from the UK government for that last 5 years. It's now competing with all other sectors, including health, education, social care. Now, I think from an agricultural point of view, health is a top priority, absolute top priority. But let's not forget, what we produce in high-quality food is second in line when it comes to the health service. And I think that's something we should need to be proud of. And from an agritourism perspective, showcasing that across the world is fantastic. And I think the people in this room are doing that. And I think you should be proud of what you're doing, because it comes back to that education point. Now, my mother started doing bed and breakfast actually in 1967 when I was just 2. Obviously, I was causing that much problem. She had to get more income to cope with that. And of course, we've done that ever since, and we've done it in our own right at home. Since 1996, and although it's just a small bed and breakfast, it's helped, it's augmented the income. Again, the challenge is a lot of agriculture have had to diversify to try and improve that income. But that's not to say that if you've got a successful farming business, you still thrive with agritourism. We've got Highland cattle, we've got 65 cows at home, 700 breeding ewes, and we've hosted a number of people from across Europe, Canada and the States to come across and see what we are doing as an agricultural business, just because of the position I'm in. But we've never done anything commercially. And Caroline actually came up and gave us a visit last year and said, this is crazy, you should be showcasing this to a wider population, and we're going to take that on board. So we're going to move in this agritourism line because we think it's a fantastic opportunity to help educate our public. Now, I think in terms of the education perspective, we can do a lot more. We do Open Farm Sunday, which again, the experience and the reward that we got from that, not the people that were coming out onto the farm, the reward that we got from that was tremendous. And I think it shows that we've got something to be really proud of. So I'm always upbeat, and I'm an eternal optimist. My glass is always half full. It will continue to be so, and I know there's challenges out there. Negativity is the only bit that gets me down, and sometimes we've got a bad habit of talking the industry down. We need to keep talking it up, and if we can remain optimistic, then agritourism for Scotland's only going to go from strength to strength. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much to all of our speakers taking the stand to share some of your own perspectives today. I mean, I guess, I don't know what your own feeling is. Is there any way we could just raise the lights a little bit in the hall? Because I can see there's people trying to avoid us at the back, and I can pick you out more easily there. I mean, I suppose, just from my perspective of rural economies, what I've seen with our own business that has a really localised supply chain and also deals with travel trade and some of that wider business as well, is once money comes into us, it does tend to then be spent within our own immediate rural economy, doesn't it? And I think, you know, it's very well to kind of understand that already we're part of a sort of 60 million or, you know, plus your farm retail, you know, 170 million pound industry. But once you start listening to the stories like Lindore's this morning, 40 businesses on top of their own investment in their own staff bill and their own purchasing are directly building their own, you know, income generation and supporting that rural economy through. And I think that's where the real strength and value of agritourism sits when we think about where we're located and how we can be a driver within that. Opening up to you guys, I appreciate we are the biggest of the breakout sessions this morning, which also means we should have the best questions, observation, comments. Who wants to go first? I know we've got a mix of people in here, from agritourism businesses to some of our trade members. I know the guys from Blair Drum and Smiddy, who are one of our trade members, are over there as well. Obviously really important in your own rural communities too. Would anybody like to put their hand up? and either share something that they think they see as real opportunities or real barriers. We've got someone down the front here. Do we have a roving mic, or are we just standing? I think you'll just have to chat and we can... Stand and shout. Yes, stand and shout, and I will repeat it.
It's an observation, really. We started 5, 6, 7 years ago, diversified business, and it's been hell. We have fought, thank you. We have fought the council, we have fought, I don't know, everything. It's just consultants, consultants, money out, money out, money out. And when you go looking for help, it's not there. There's not the financial support. We had, through planning, we had, I can't remember, conditions put upon us to improve roads, to do this, to do that, way beyond what was even helpful. It's how do you get over that? How do we get local West Lothian Council to waken up and smell the coffee? Because actually we're now employing, and we're employing, you talk about indoors having 40 businesses, well, we're probably at about 20 that we're supporting. And there's no support, I feel. The only place that I get any support is through Westerton Farm and Scottish Agritourism. Yeah. Sorry, NFU, maybe a wee bit there too, but I just feel that there's a huge amount of help that could be, you'd say, well, what kind of help do you want? All help. Yeah. Help us through this quagmire of planning. We want to build a new house. No, you can't build a new house. We don't want you to build a new house here. We don't want you to do this. We don't want you to do that. Well, what do you want us to do? And when we ask them that, they don't have an answer. Yeah. So it's how do we get that message over to the powers that be? At the same time, we're in a regional park. There are no rangers. We've got huge public pressure. And I sound like I'm whinging, and my glass usually is half full of white wine. But I really do think it's important to help people to get over that thing. And if you don't support Monitor Farm, or you don't support rural leadership programs, it's game over. Yeah,
you do wonder whether that's why that thing Caroline talked about this morning of the network of part of Scottish Agritourism is what, as members, we all really appreciate, because you get more common sense help from asking some other members than you often do going through the routes.
From the WhatsApp group, more help than ever has come from, sorry to say it, economic development.
Caroline picked up a couple of things. Just a quick show of hands then. Who would put their hand up if they felt they had faced a barrier in terms of planning in the room? Okay, hands up anyone who felt they had a barrier in terms of that finance or some funding. There's a few there. I thought it was really interesting what Linda said earlier, that they had SRDP priority funding to begin with, and I know we did as well, and you're absolutely right. The ability to sometimes draw in and lever some money at the beginning when you're not very confident, and then it acts as a springboard where you then become much more competent about going out to the marketplace, I suppose, for your borrowing. Does anyone from the panel have any thoughts about I guess particularly around either the planning or the funding side, where do you see some of those funding pots as being available to encourage people to start off their journeys?
I know that when we started up, there just wasn't really anything at all to do that. Even the rural leadership programme we funded ourselves. We're in a really fortunate position where we are able to borrow. We've got a really good relationship with our bank, so we've self-funded a lot of our projects, but the funding has been really, really difficult to come across. We've had some from Aberdeenshire Council, small pots to help improve things that we're already doing, but no start-up funding, which I know is a barrier. And in terms of planning, again, we had a building there. We were only applying for a change of use, and it was a relatively onerous process. And I think the support of the network here, again, is really good for helping, but what is tricky with planning is that every single council works differently, and actually even people within those councils work differently. So you could be in the same council area, and if person A and person B get it, they have completely different opinions. We applied for a small farm track up the side of our shop to stop the public having to drive through the main farmyard to get to the shop, and we were told we couldn't do that because it was taking away prime agricultural land. So we accepted that and we moved on, even though we felt it was a more unsafe option. And now we're faced with the prospect of having 3 57-metre pylons coming right through our farm from SSE, but they're happy to take away the prime agricultural land for that project, but not for the public safety. So I think there's just so much conflicting information, which I think makes it hard. So the support is there, but I think it's really, really tricky to find.
Planning. Can you hear me?
A quick answer. Because
well, planning is an utter minefield. I do sit on the planning committee. Your example that you've just said, I would have referred that to the local review body. I would have appealed it. That is a policy that sits within National Planning Framework 4. That, yes, and then sometimes I think, thank goodness we've got this policy. But I would say engage with your local authority before you make a planning application. If you can afford to, get a planning consultant to help you with it. Engage with your local councillors. Most local authorities really don't understand agriculture and all that goes with it. I'm working hard within Perth and Kinross, within that building. I keep nagging them, and I now sit in the chamber and say, I'm on my pet subject, agriculture.
Yeah.
So it is tough, and I hear that, and I believe West Lothian is
and I think
not one of the best.
Picking up Martin's point as well, Martin, you talked about agriculture, you know, now being in the mix of everything else. And perhaps in the past, our conversations about the support we've needed for our sector have been very focused into the agricultural department. Are we going to need a different skill set? Are we going to be having to talk to different people? How?
I think it's how we put that over and how we make the case, because I think the problem is there's a lot of inconsistency as well when it comes to planning in particular. I can understand, to be absolutely fair, I can understand the constraints there is in budgets right now. Every single budget is under a serious amount of constraint. So to a degree, that's accepted. However, the planning side is mind-blowing, because that is actually stifling innovation, investment, return on investment, which pays taxes inevitably. So that's, to my mind, the planning one is one that should be looked at, because this is about entrepreneurs trying to develop businesses and see growth. Now, at the minute, we're needing to see that growth, because growth is the only way you're going to get return. So I accept to a degree the budgets, but it's how you target the budgets is going to be important. But planning, there's so much inconsistency.
And perhaps how we frame them as being opportunities within the planning process and just the barriers. Anything else from our folks on the floor? We've got a gentleman right in the middle. Is that you, Mr. Bowser? Excellent. Oh, mic's on its way.
You're on mute. Yeah.
No, just shout, Neil, and I can...
I'll just shout then.
Oh, there we are. The mic's on. Oh, we're on now. We're on now.
Fourth time. Fourth time lucky. I think one of the problems we've seen in 1 or 2 agritourism businesses in our area is electrical hookups. Everything's ready to go, and the electricity companies appear to be utterly, utterly useless. No can do, won't communicate, and it's costing people serious, serious thousands of pounds. I know of 2 cases very local to me. I think since lockdown, everyone working from home, it appears that it's just too difficult to get anything done, and that's really stifling business.
Thanks, Neil. Anyone, any specific comments about infrastructure?
Well, it's good.
Martin?
Yeah, I mean, it's always a challenge. I mean, Fiona's just highlighted the issues around massive structures of pylons coming through the area, and it's always challenging, because if we want more connectivity, if we want more power to get across the country, it's going to have to go somewhere. And it's about where it's going to go, how it's compensated. But I can understand the concerns, but we need that connectivity, and we need to be able to export power. We talked about it earlier on this morning. What we've got from a renewable source in Scotland is fantastic, but how do you export it? So that comes back, and I'm afraid that comes back down to planning again, and a bit more thought.
But I tell you what rural communities do really, really well is like the creativity and that element of pulling together to deliver. And I think Sarah talking at the Real Food Cafe this morning about, you know, they've really delivered on infrastructure and amenities and, you know, that power of people coming together. And it is frustrating, though, when you reach a certain point where you can't deal with the problem yourself. And that's what's frustrating, isn't it, is when it's there. We've got anyone else on the floor? I'm conscious I'm not seeing over. Stand up and wave if we've got anyone there. Anyone else with any specific observations or any examples of what has worked really well in their rural area? Caroline? Yes, you can stand from there.
Yeah, I guess I've got a question maybe directed at Martin about, and possibly Claire, on, you know, going back in the good old days when we put our money into the EU pot, we got money, got money back out from the EU. You know, there was a big amount of money in Pillar 2 CAP, which was invested in the rural economy. I don't think this is on. It invested in bridges and halls. There was, you know, start-up grants to help rural entrepreneurs and things like that. And in the debate and the movement out of the EU and into the new agricultural policy, we've lost all discussion about that Pillar 2 rural development pot. So, I'm just about finished my question.
A quick recap.
Anyway, the point is about, you know, that we just have lost all that money, all those millions of pounds, and why is nobody talking about it?
Yeah, because you're right, Caroline, if you couldn't hear at the back, it was a question about, of those multiple millions that went into hard infrastructure projects within Europe, why is there no obvious replacement for that within Claire?
Well, I think I would answer a wee bit indirectly and say we really do need to get back and try and form a relationship with Europe. My party's certainly saying that, and post this budget, that's wide and clear. We need to start to get back before we can open the door again. I think the funding has just been disregarded. You are quite correct. And infrastructure investment out with pylons and power lines, I'm concerned about that too. I want the A9 dualed, apart from anything else. So, and the cost of infrastructure has gone up. You only see our new road here in Perth and Kinross. That's a massive amount of money we're spending on that. So Martin, it's vital.
What about you? Are you party to any discussions or decision, or you know about how that future spend will be profiled coming forward?
I mean, obviously through the new agricultural support structure is going to be four-tiered structure. Tier 3 is going to be critical for that because that's where a lot of the rural development fund was going into. And Tier 4, but Tier 3 and Tier 4 is going to be critical in this. The issue around the funding that was coming from Europe is we were promised and sold a pup, to be honest, because we were told we're net contributors when it comes to funding into Europe. So that money should still be there. And I think we should keep making the case for that because that was what we were told. As we were net contributors to Europe, then we should now have a beneficial financial benefit back into the whole of the UK. And that European funding that was so vital, particularly to our outlying areas, look at the work that was going into Orkney, Shetland, the Western Isles, a lot of that was European funding, and indeed across the mainland. But we need to still make that case because we were told on a constant basis we're net contributors, so that funding will be even greater if we utilise it ourselves, which was, there was an awful lot of things we were sold with as a pup when it came to Brexit. There wasn't a bit. However, that's my own view, but I think we should still make that case because that was a pot of money that was so important to the wider infrastructure and going into rural development throughout Scotland that benefited not just ourselves, but the wider, the wider population.
Yeah, and I guess in its broadest sense, probably that bit about and why I think things like the rural leader, Scotland's rural leaders has been such a big thing, isn't it? It is about trying to build a voice across the whole of the rural sector, irrespective of geography or profession, so that we can best represent the needs of our rural communities, within that policy level discussion, as well as what we're actually all delivering on the ground in terms of going forward. Because Caroline is here and she is waving her clock at me, we will probably need to make an end there. That's our session finished. We're moving on next. Is everyone coming back into the room? Yep. Okie dokes. So if there's a quick... Oh, Caroline says I can keep going till they come back for that. I was going to ask the panel members, in terms of like your own individual contribution to rural economy, what is it? Is there a particular thing that you think you're really proud of, either in a really localised within your own communities or in a professional sense? What are you most proud of in terms of your own contribution to your own rural community and economy, do you think?
In terms of hyper-local, we are, as a business, we're really supportive of a lot of, you know, we sponsor the local football team, we donate regularly to the hot meals in Lawrencekirk and Auchenblae. So we try and, they seem like small things, but actually to the community they're quite big. So we don't focus on one particularly big thing. We try and broaden it across loads of different groups there. But we're also really conscious in terms of the rural economy, you know, in terms of making ourselves accessible to people, in terms of being a destination where if they're making the point of coming to our business, they're going to get a lot out of it in trying to pay back that way. We try and really tell our story and how we support, you know, you were speaking earlier about Lindor supporting all these other businesses. That was how the shop kind of came about initially, was during COVID, all of these micro businesses had their markets and things cancelled, so we got in touch with them all and said, come and sell it through us. And I think so, you know, we probably support around about 30 local businesses through the shop alone.
And acting as that catalyst within
Exactly,
your own
and encouraging them. And you know, we don't massively commercialise a lot of our pop-up shops and stuff, because we're doing that from a community point of view, a support point of view, rather than a commercial business point of view. And I think that's quite important.
Come on in, guys. That's the high session, I think, coming in at the back. Brilliant. We'll take a stop at that. If anyone needs to nip out for a pee before the next session starts, that's great. Thank you to all our panellists for your time and input this afternoon, and enjoy the rest of the day.